Okay, I see we are currently live. All right, Michelle, I will let you take it away.
Thank you. We're just going to let a few people join. I know, as I said, I literally just left council planning committee, so I can see some of the Councillor Morales. I see you've raised your hand. Was that, did you want to say something? Maybe not. Okay, no, you.
Okay, so I believe our councillors are asking if they need to be panelists.
You do not need to be panelist councillors. We did talk about this with Wendy Cook. So you do not need to be panelists. If you, so I see, gotcha. So you do not need to be panelists. You can just listen. And we certainly obviously appreciate that you're here, but you do not need to be a panelist. So I see a lot of you on the call now, which is amazing. So I'm just going to get started with the technical piece of it. So hello, thank you everyone. We see the live streaming has already happened, so that's amazing. My name is Michelle Banfield and I'm the Director of Development Services at the City of Barrie, and I'm super happy that you are all able to join us. Tonight we do have, even though it is a town hall meeting, we are joined by members of council that are here to listen, and as well as senior city staff. So we just wanted to share with you, as I said, the councillors that are on the call, because I know that was how important, and we certainly have Councillor Kungle, we have Deputy Mayor Barrie Ward on the call. We also have, I'm just kind of scrolling down here, Councillor Gary Harvey. Obviously, you've already heard me say hello to Councillor Morales. We have Councillor Keenan Aylwin on the call. We also have Mayor Lehman, I believe. Councillor McCann is on the call. And as I said, Councillor Morales and Mayor Lehman. So we definitely have many of our council members. A couple of them did have conflicts, and they do send their apologies. They will be able to watch this as well on the YouTube channel after the fact. So thank you, and again, welcome to all of you. And so really for this evening, what we are going to do, Tom, you were saying how many people are in attendance this evening?
So far we have, it just went up from 48 to 52.
Okay, great. And we have about 15 people that wanted to speak. And so we will, we have a speakers list, and we will just work through that speakers list. And, you know, most recently, the working version of the official plan is the document that's out there right now. And the official plan, that's the working version, a track changes version, as well as a comment matrix. We're intended to respond to over the 550 comments that were received on the version that we issued in draft 2. And certainly, you know, many of those comments were related to some of those key priorities: protecting our neighborhoods, affordable housing, intensification areas, employment areas, as well as any sort of recognition of existing planning approvals. You know, we certainly feel with each and every draft of the official plan, we've gotten so much closer to the point where we're getting closer to having the plan articulated in a way that really reflects that community vision. So, you know, at the same time, we know that this is an important document, and it's a very important document. And during the public meeting that was held last June, we had a request to have some additional, have an additional meeting, which is where we're here tonight. So I'm just going to talk to you just a little bit about how that town hall is going to work. given the amount of speakers we have, we are going to ask people to be as concise as possible. Around the 15-minute mark would be amazing. Very typical to a public process. I know some of you may be speaking for multiple properties, so we will do our very best to recognize that. But again, at the same time, as concise as you can be will be certainly appreciated. And you're welcome to take that time to express any sort of thoughts you have. And again, we'll be working through that speakers list. When you call your name, we'll be able to give you the ability to speak. And we'll see where we're at once we've gone through the list of registered speakers. If we have time, we can certainly open the floor. And if you're asking a specific question, what I'd like to say is that it's like a typical kind of public meeting. We're not going to be debating or answering questions that aren't like super quick, but we will take note of everything, and we will absolutely do a follow-up to all of you that have registered this evening with any kind of specific questions. So on that note, we are ready to begin, and our first speaker this evening, we are going to start with Arlene Mccann. Is Arlene on the line? There you are, Arlene. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
I think Arlene just has to unmute her microphone.
Is Arlene having a hard time unmuting herself? Can any of our technical staff unmute Arlene?
Yes, she is unmute. She's allowed to speak. She needs to allow the speaker on her phone or cell phone.
Okay, Arlene, we're saying that you have the ability to unmute yourself. At the bottom left of your screen, there is a mute icon, like a little microphone, that if you scroll over, you should be able to.
Michelle, I don't see her on the list of participants anymore. I think we may have lost her.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next speaker then, and then hopefully Arlene can come back. And so the next speaker is Kathy Colbach. Kathy, are you on the line?
Hi there, Michelle. Can you hear me?
Hi,
okay?
We can hear you. Hi,
Thank
welcome.
you.
Welcome.
Thanks. I bet Arlene's having a heart attack because I'm sure she wants to ask or make comment about trees. But I'll wait.
If she finds a way to join back, we'll be able to see her and we'll be able to slot her in, no problem.
Perfect. Okay, there. So obviously, huge document. Kudos for all the work that has gone into it so far. I have seen changes that I'm liking, but I do have, I have a question, and I don't know whether this is something that you can do. From a historic neighborhood or heritage, built form heritage resource and cultural heritage resource, can you put all of that information related to policies and standards in one section, as opposed to having to sort of look at section 3 and section 8, and then maybe there's something in section 2.7, and because for the normal person who doesn't spend their day reading this, it's very difficult to find all of the information that you might want to comment on.
We can absolutely take a look at the formatting of it for sure.
Okay, thank you. That would certainly make it easier for people that are really, we're really heritage specific, as you know. And the other couple of comments I wanted to make was on consents, the section that talks about consents and severance. Is there definitions of what is minor and what is major somewhere that I haven't found? Or is it just based on, planning staff deciding whether it's major or minor?
So Kathy, again, I don't really want, we weren't going to have time to kind of do back
Okay.
and forth. And I'm absolutely happy to kind of take a reflection of your questions.
Okay.
Planning, that's absolutely Planning Act. It's actually not city staff, it's all Planning Act. So happy to, if you do have a list of questions, why don't we just kind of go through the questions and we can get them recorded, and then we'll be able to kind of loop back with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And then under development policy section, I think it's 2.6.3.3, where it's showing maximum height of buildings outside of the urban growth, the strategic growth and transit areas as being the maximum height being 20 stories in those areas outside of the urban growth. But I wasn't able to see anywhere where it spoke to maximum building height within the urban growth and intensification areas. And is that something that the city would consider putting on paper? I know, as an example, we're going to cap height at a certain area or a certain height. So that would be one of my comments. And then I think the SIP. When I looked at the SIP section where it talked about the community improvement plan area, it really doesn't, in the context of heritage, it talks about sort of a broader scope now where you've changed it to talk about, the entire city is, SIP is available for the entire city under the various, whether it's redevelopment, development, etc. And it talks about rehabilitation. Is that replacing actually wording that speaks to heritage specific? That's my question. And I guess tree protection would be the other. There is very little I see here in terms of tree protection in the official plan and the actual percentage of trees the city is looking at planting as opposed to having developers plant in new developments. So as I know, as in with new developments, there's a specific number of trees and landscaping that needs to be done through development. But what is the city themselves doing with respect to additional tree planting throughout the city? And where might that be? And those are my comments, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And I appreciate that. And again, we will take note of all of those and we will definitely loop back on that. So thank you so much. And thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you.
I do notice that Arlene Mccann is back on the line. So I'd like to go back to her to see if she's able to unmute herself and say hello. There you are. Hello, welcome.
Hey, it's actually her husband, Mark.
These virtual things are so freaky, right? Okay, all right. So it's not Arlene. Hi, Mark. You have the floor for around 5 minutes, if you don't mind. Thanks.
I was looking at your the historical neighborhood strategy that you did back in June 2010, that Jeff Lehman actually chaired when he was Ward 2 councillor, and there are so many relevant issues that you need to revisit. And I'm just quoting what he had, or what the report said. And actually, Kathy was part of that report. And I'd love you to go back and have a look at it. It noted, landmark heritage properties have been lost to fires and demolition. And there are concerns, of course, of additional losses in the future. And then they talk about vacant and derelict properties are a growing concern. So within the official plan, look at these derelict properties and make sure that we are pinpointing a strategy to deal with them. You have established design standards for new development to ensure that it is in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood. And these are your words, protect and increase the city tree canopy. Retain and incorporate existing heritage structures. And it goes on, and it is absolutely to the point for historic neighborhoods, which are for us are very important because we live in Allendale. And I guess when I was looking at the overall zoning, it shows R3 for this area. And that is a little bit of a concern for me. And I was thinking that maybe that intensification is a little high, and that maybe we should look at maybe R1 or R2 for the strictly residential portions of the historic neighborhoods, whether it be Allendale or the others that were commented, like Brock Park, West Village, Queens Park, downtown, all of the residential portions. We need to really pinpoint the intensification that we're going to allow in those areas. And that was our point tonight, that we would love you to go back and have a look at that paper that was created. And it was very relevant then, and it's still relevant today. Did you have anything else?
No,
that's it.
Thank you very much for being here this evening and for taking time to speak to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move on to our next speaker, which is Jennifer Van Gennep. Jennifer, can you unmute yourself? Obviously, our team will. Hi, how are you? Hi, welcome. You've got about 5 minutes. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm commenting on behalf of the Barrie chapter, as usual, and we wish to start by once again thanking city staff for encouraging our engagement throughout this long process of writing this official plan. It feels like, I know for me it feels like years, so I can only imagine what it feels like for you. But we really appreciate your willingness to meet with us and answer questions and consider our suggestions. So as an Alliance to End Homelessness, our primary interest in the official plan is in section 6, the policies that relate to affordable housing, and that new subsection that's been added for addressing the needs of vulnerable populations. So tonight I just have a couple of comments really to reiterate. In the new section about vulnerable populations, which includes some direction for increased washroom access and warming and cooling centers, we once again thank you for adding this section. We appreciate that. If we can push our luck just a little bit with it, even further, we now ask for slightly stronger language. There's some seek tos and support and establish where appropriate, and we'd like to see stronger language that leaves a little less wiggle room and makes a firm commitment to ensuring access to washrooms, drinking water, and emergency shelters from extreme weather for our neighbors that need them. And then for the city's commitments to affordable housing, I'll just once again note that we are extremely concerned to see a target of only 10% of new developments as affordable. I've shared this concern here at every opportunity. I know you are all well aware that affordable housing is a defined term by the provincial government that for Barrie amounts to rents at or below the average market rent. And this definition did not originate from the Social Services Ministry. It is found in the provincial policy statement, and it is meant for planning purposes, and it is intended to set the standard of what is affordable to households at the 60th percentile for income. So not just those on social assistance or working for minimum wage, but for nurses and teachers and IT professionals. And as we know, the average market rent continues to go up and up and up, and Barrie is now regularly in the top 3 rental prices in the country. So with a target of only 10% of new units as affordable, this means 90% of new units can be above average market rent, which will, of course, then drag that average up even higher. So when developers push back on suggestions to increase the target, council and staff, we have to ask ourselves, who is the city for? Barrie needs an official plan that centers the needs of residents, not the demands of developers. Advocates are increasingly pointing to the role of municipalities and their land use planning when it comes to the housing crisis we find ourselves in. Good city planning includes housing along the full income spectrum of the people who call that city home. Anything less immediately starts to limit the ability for residents to participate fully in their community and in their local economy. Or worse, a 2016 study published in the Journal of Urban Affairs found that for every $100 a month increase in median rents across several jurisdictions, homelessness increased between 15 and 39%. This is playing out in Barrie right now, with our shelters overflowing and 80 to 90 of our neighbors are sleeping outside every night. So we strongly urge council and staff to not bow to pressure from developers and to set a higher affordable housing target in the official plan. We would suggest a target of 30% affordable for all new developments in the MTSAs and the UGCs, with 10% targeted at deeply affordable, a defined term to be set at a lower threshold. And then 15% affordable across the city and 5% of across the city at that deeply affordable level. And we would also encourage a strategy around cash in lieu of affordable housing with a fund developed for that purpose. Finally, we would encourage you to request ministry approval for designating both the Allendale Waterfront GO Station and the Barrie South GO Station as protected major transit station areas. As we understand it, that allows for the use of inclusionary zoning in those areas as a planning tool, which would strengthen our ability to require affordable development. So as always, we are available to help in any way we can in our shared goal of a more resilient city where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and we always appreciate you taking the time to join us and to share your thoughts, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Kelly Patterson Mcgrath. Kelly, are you available to come? You should be on. Oh, there you are. Awesome.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Kelly.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So you have about 5 or so minutes to give us your thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd really like to thank and appreciate staff's work on this, specifically the comment matrix document. Honestly, it was really, really great to see all the comments captured in that document, and I really appreciate the time and energy and effort it took to do that. So thank you very much. Secondly, I'd like to also thank you for listening. For people that sometimes feel frustrated and or don't want to comment because they feel they're not heard, I was heard, and specifically the vision statement, really great words were added that I made a suggestion on, and I was really pleased to see that. So you can make a difference. So part of that is to say thank you for listening. I really appreciated it. The other piece on the comment matrix that I just wanted to make a suggestion, and I had again talked about engagement and how we can better engage people in the community, specifically the community. So I don't think we have trouble engaging developers to comment, because I think in this particular document that's 132 pages long, the comment matrix was probably 80% developers that were making comments. So one of the suggestions that I have, and this relates to the young people that were out talking about climate action, and it was such a joy to see them out there. One of the ideas is that if we can reach out to the Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance directly for their specific feedback on climate action for our sections 5 and 6. And I think engaging our youth is really important. And I know sometimes we push out and we wait for people to come to us, but directly engaging that particular group, I think, would be very helpful in deciding how we implement climate action in our official plan. I think that's an important group to engage if we could do that somehow. Also with the high school students, and I saw that there was, Michelle, you presented, and I saw a youth workbook there, and I wasn't really clear on what that was, but great. Again, could we be more specific when we're asking for feedback on the official plan in these particular areas? When we have these young people engaged in climate action, let's work on those specific sections of the official plan and give them that opportunity to give that incredible heartfelt support and feedback. So that's just another comment. I'd also, I was very happy to see at the City of Vancouver is implementing their particular plan when it comes to a zero emissions building plan, and they have done that, and their plan is by 2030 to have that on board. By January 2022, specifically, again, they did this through zoning amendments. They will require their 6-story buildings to have a zero emission heating system with roof insulation. So they're really pushing forward. They're being very bold. And I think we need to take a look at how other cities are dealing with our climate change and climate action, and our buildings are getting to zero emissions. And I think it's really important, as we have declared a climate emergency. So just taking those into consideration, how we view other cities and what they're actually doing with their zero emission builds. I really think the city of Barrie needs to be bolder, and we need to use stronger language. Instead of requirements and guidelines, we need to be very specific about what we're asking our developers to bring to the city. So those are the few comments that I had, Michelle. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly. And certainly, I mean, you're talking about how long this OP has been going on. And so the youth book and even our chats with the high school students happened a couple of years ago, but because it is definitely has been going on for a while, but absolutely, it was fantastic talking to the youth of today and asking them where they want to live and how they plan to get to work and what kind of jobs they want to do. It's super exciting. So thanks for your time, Kelly. The next speaker on the list is Karen Hanson. So Karen, you should be promoted and you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. I was concerned about how to unmute, so thank you for making that show up on my screen. I won't take up too much of your time. Thank you for all of your hard work on the official plan. I certainly know it has been very labor intensive for you and your team, but it's such an important document. So thank you for giving it so much attention. Couple of talking points here from me. The city no longer has any mixed use designations in the new official plan. And in most instances, they have been replaced with a medium density designation that permits a minimum of 6 stories and a maximum of 12 stories. In the case of the phase 3 lands, where you know our group has holdings, the city has converted the former mixed use designation to be simply neighborhood area, like the balance of the phase 3 lands. This approach has occurred for other lands in the phase 3 area as well. The neighborhood area permits a maximum of 4 stories unless we're on an intensification corridor. The particular area that I'm talking about is not on an intensification corridor. So my first concern is about that limitation of the 4 stories. I believe that we've demonstrated to the city on numerous occasions in very successful projects, such as the Gallery and Bistro 6, that we have been able to integrate 6-story product along with low-rise development of between 2 and 3 stories, and been able to create still beautiful streetscapes while intensifying the density on the site. We've been able to demonstrate before as well that we use the same platform size for a 4-story building as a 6-story building, thereby, going up instead of necessarily spread out. In this meeting, as you know, I am a strong advocate for affordable housing, and I have heard others voice concerns about affordable housing as well. Going up to 6 stories also assists our affordable housing mandate, where we can increase the densities, again, while still using the same footprints of the buildings. I would also like to speak to the wording suggests that if limited or no commercial and retail uses exist within 450 meters, then a mixture of uses will be required along the arterial road. This means in the particular area of some of the phase 3 lands that I was speaking to that are our holdings, ground floor commercial would be required. And the policy further states that 50% of the building frontage is required to consist of non-residential uses. Michelle, as I'm sure that you will recall, and many councillors and Mayor Lehman will recall, my conversations about base level commercial have gone on for about a decade. I firmly believe in base level commercial in places where it is suitable, such as along nodes or corridors, but to require base level commercial, as I've said many, many times at public meetings, I am concerned number one, that it will end up just being brown paper in the windows, because the intensification of the commercial should be in those designated areas where people go to shop. If commercial is not leased out, then unfortunately the residential units above have to subsidize the commercial. To put a base level commercial within the buildings requires an incredible amount of very expensive infrastructure to protect against smells and noises, et cetera, that are far, far beyond those required in between residential suites. So I don't agree that commercial should be required outside at the base level of these residential buildings, outside of nodes and main corridors, for the many, many reasons that I have expressed for many, many years in the past. Obviously, it also hurts affordable housing to have those upper level units have to subsidize the base level commercial. Again, I am not suggesting that I don't believe in mixed use development with base level commercial. I do believe in this product type, in the nodes and corridors that have been suggested by the city in many, many plans before, such as surrounding the GO stations, surrounding, downtown areas and those main corridor areas. So I'm happy to answer any questions for clarification, but just to sum up, and I think I'm under my 5 minutes, so am I allowed to give any of my remaining time to Ray Duhamel? Because I know he's
no.
my primary concern is that these buildings should be allowed to go up to 6 stories in those phase 3 lands. And I still believe it's a beautiful urban mix. And I also believe that base level commercial should not be required, except in a node or corridor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks. Thanks for your time and for joining this evening. The next speaker is Keith Mckinnon. Keith, we should unmute you, and you should be able to speak for 5-ish minutes, although I suspect you are speaking for more than just one property owner, but if you can be as brief and concise as possible, everyone will appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. Certainly appreciate it. Firstly, certainly thank you and your staff for the work that you've been doing with the official plan, for the opportunities that you've been able to meet with us to hear our concerns. It is certainly appreciated. We do also appreciate this additional meeting this evening. So as you know, I do represent the Salem Landowners Group, and I do have a number of other clients, both within the Salem and Hewitt secondary plan areas. Generally, we do have still a number of concerns with the official plan. We will be providing a written submission that further details what our continued issues are, but just to highlight those that we still have some concerns with relate to, firstly, the phasing policies. So we did touch that on your presentation earlier for phases 3 and 4, changing that from 60% draft approval as it's currently set out in the secondary plans today to 60% registration. It's frankly our view that in doing so, you're going to create a significant time gap between draft approvals and registrations, which ultimately will not get to the point where we can continue to pay the city's development charges to help with the financial situation with the city. So we think that that should continue to be as it is in the secondary plans today at 60% draft approvals for those remaining phases as well. We are also concerned with policy 2.6.7.2D that speaks to restricting lids in parks. We think that that is a bit short-sighted, certainly when you have the conservation authorities that are seeking to have LIDs everywhere as possible. We think certainly parks are a good location to have these types of features. We continue, as you also noted in your presentation, would still like to obviously see the Salem secondary plan as it is today continue to move forward as it is. We still seem to be in our infancy in terms of seeing the community grow as it was envisioned through that secondary plan. So we would still like to see those policies remain as they are. We still remain concerned about the 79 persons and jobs per hectare in section 2.4.2.3. Obviously, the secondary plan areas and those plans that have been draft approved and some that have moved to registrations are 50 persons and jobs per hectare or above. So we're concerned that if you're not meeting the overall 79 persons and jobs per hectare, does that mean the future developments are going to have to be increased significantly in density to make up that difference? Section 2.5.3.b, which is urban design policies requiring conformity, which in our opinion is not reasonable. We believe the urban design policy should still be a bit more flexible, given that they are guidelines. So we would like to see some changes there. Under section 2.5.6 with existing approvals, there's a component in there that speaks to if ownership changes, then the approvals will change and the conformity to the new OP would be required. And we're not quite sure how that is in fact legal. So we'd like some sort of further conversation with that. Community hub policies under section 2.6.4.3C, specifically, as Karen just mentioned, related to 50% frontage for commercial uses. In particular, we're thinking about school sites that ultimately, if they may be not required for schools for either the school boards or the city not picking it up as a park potentially. So then it would be redeveloped for residential uses. We don't think those are proper locations to have 50% frontage for commercial uses, similar to the concerns that Karen's already raised. The road network shown in phase 4 in the Salem secondary plan area continues to be shown, which we do not believe should be shown because that area has not been properly planned yet. So we don't want to presuppose where those roads may go. And the couple of additional comments I have relates to the right-of-way widths under map 5 have changed now from the previous version, which seem to have grown in size from the previous version, which are not quite consistent to the right-of-way plan that was prepared for the secondary plan areas and which draft approvals have been provided for. So we're concerned about those increased right-of-way widths not being consistent with that. And then lastly, as it relates to a particular area in the Salem secondary plan, there is a collector road called Excel Avenue, which continues to be shown as a 24-meter collector road. And as we noted previously, we still do not believe, because it's a road that goes nowhere, that it should be shown as a local road as opposed to a collector road. So very high level, those are my comments, Michelle. And as noted, I will certainly put that in writing, but do appreciate you hearing my concerns this evening.
Not a problem, Keith, and I appreciate that you are here and sharing those thoughts. Thanks so much. And we are going to move on to the next speaker, and that is Ray Duhamel. So Ray, you should be promoted and able to unmute yourself now. Again, I understand you are representing a few landowners, so I won't get a gong out at the 5-minute mark, but your ability to stay as brief and concise as possible is appreciated by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Would it be possible for me to share my screen? Can you give me presenter status?
I'm not sure if I can. Can someone else on my team do that? See, Ray, you'll know if it happens because you'll kind of like go out and come back in again. Okay, I think Ray, they're working on it.
Ray, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me still?
We can.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now share my screen, please, and thank you. All right, can you see my screen? Oh, sorry, I gotta hit the share button. Sorry about that.
We can see a big black screen. There you go, Ray. Yep.
Thank you so much. So I won't, I do want to mention that I think that this draft of the official plan, I appreciate the hard work that's gone into it. Clearly, a lot of comments have been made in the round 1 and round 2. You've done a lot of work trying to work through those comments, and I appreciate it. And I know the landowners appreciate it. I think we're closing in on getting there. There's still some points to work on, and we look forward to working with you over the next number of weeks to try to close out the final number of concerns that we have. I am representing 7 different landowners. I'll try to describe those as I move along. But before I get going though, Michelle, and just for the benefit of anybody watching, I'd like to be able to follow up in writing, and I know a couple of landowners want to provide some comments to you in writing. Is there a time period where you want to, where there's a date that you want to receive those by? I'm thinking a couple of weeks.
Yeah, June. I think it was June 2nd, Ray. But I will take comments obviously as soon as possible. We always will take letters. Staff are going to, I think I said at the beginning, regroup after listening to what we hear tonight, and we'll have a better idea of timelines moving forward. So we can let you know, but I would suggest the sooner you can get those comments into us, the better. That would be great.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I'll say that we'll work towar's 2 weeks unless you.
Yeah, I was saying like around the end of, I was thinking in my mind around the end of October-ish, but definitely we can, we're always happy to
I
accept.
appreciate that. Okay, so I'll just start first. I represent the Hewitt's Creek Landowners Group, who represent, as you know, but for anybody listening on the screen, a large area in the southeast corner of the city of Barrie at the south end. My first comment, which has been repeated in the last 2 comments that I'm going to share with you, but it's for the benefit of the council members that are listening, is that the Hewitts and Salem secondary plans have been completely removed from this new plan. And I understand, and you and I have spoken about the city's desire not to have separate rules for separate areas of the city. But I think when you have master plan communities that have, where 11 years have gone into the planning and advanced funding and designing and starting to construct infrastructure, and now homes are starting to be constructed for upwards of 40 to 50,000 people. I think it's fair that a separate set of rules would apply to those master planned areas. And because of removing the Hewitt's land, the Hewitt secondary plan and the Salem secondary plan, it's difficult to try to determine every single policy implication, because we have to try to find every policy that's been removed and where it's in the new plan. And if it's not in the new plan, what are the implications of that? And you've introduced an entirely new framework. And because of that, I would say that's the #1 concern of the Hewitt's Landowners Group. And I would say in my experience, I've never seen a scenario where the amount of money, thousands of hours and millions of dollars and a decade's worth of work has been effectively eliminated on the date that significant actual construction is occurring. So we'd ask you to reconsider, and I know that you're hesitant to do so, but I'm formally asking you as part of this town hall meeting to reconsider, please and thank you. Before you on the screen, if you can see, perhaps I should make it a little larger. The growth management strategy in your OP in section 2.4.2, I'm going to read out the highlighted area. It says, as the city's existing master plans do not contemplate these growth targets, some interim analysis may be needed before the next update to the city's master plans to ensure services can meet growth demands. Now, in the comment matrix, I brought this point up at the last draft of the OP, and it was told that the servicing master plan is undergoing and that it will be reported on when the plan goes to council for approval. I would share, I think that's a fundamental point that needs to be clarified as part of this exercise. Have you assessed the city's master plan for servicing specifically to know whether or not the growth targets that you've included in this document can be achieved? Because we don't want, quite frankly, the Hewitt's Landowners Group is installing millions and millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, and to have to rip up those pipes because they're not large enough would be problematic, to say the least. So this is, I would expect, I am actually a bit surprised, a little more than a bit surprised on this language, because a transformative new OP should be supported by master plans that back it up. And in this case, if you're not sure, then what is the onus on some developer in a future phase to demonstrate to the city that its wastewater treatment plant has enough capacity? Where does it stop? And I think that's a fundamental question that's missed as part of that statement. The next page that I'm going to go to, in your LP. Sorry, this is your designated greenfield target, and Keith Mckinnon just commented on it. And it may be very simple explanation to me that I'm just not picking up, but I think an explanation would be helpful. What is the city's expectation of 79 people and jobs per hectare? There are applications going in yesterday, tomorrow, that will not be at 79 people and jobs per hectare. There are draft approvals that are not at 79 people and jobs per hectare. If you're measuring it out up to 2051 over the designated greenfield area, which includes all of these existing subdivisions that are draft plan approved and not yet registered, or new applications that are going in before this plan comes into effect, are you going to expect 79 out of the future applications, or are you going to be expecting that they make up the shortfall from all the other subdivisions that haven't hit 79? And so that's a big deal difference. And then, of course, what are the servicing implications of reaching 79 persons and jobs per hectare? Because that's significantly higher than what the Hewitts and Salem secondary plans have been designed to today. My third comment, Michelle, is ensuring conformity with the urban design policies and guidelines. And it says that all development shall conform with the relevant urban design policies. I'd asked for this previously, and I ask you to reconsider again. Is it not reasonable when you're talking about urban design to generally conform? You know, I heard the previous speaker speak that developers want to know there should be a clear set of rules. But I also would say that one size doesn't fit all in an urban design context, either in Old Barrie or in greenfield areas. And there may be great reasons why an urban design policy or consistency with a specific guideline is not necessary, because it's a great outcome for everyone, and it addresses resident concerns that otherwise we couldn't deal with. So I think the language is still too tight to allow for some flexibility. And I think in the context of urban design policies and guidelines, generally conform and generally consistent would still achieve the fundamental framework of what you're looking for, but doesn't paint everything with a single brush. My next comment, Michelle, and this is fairly significant, this one. It's existing approvals, and then the comment after that is existing applications. I'd like to read this with you, read this to you, just so that we're on the same framework. It says, existing approvals and any other official approvals and permissions given to a site prior to the approval of this plan by the ministry are deemed to conform. Okay, full stop there. I think you and I spoke that your intention was where there were site-specific applications for zoning bylaw amendment or official plan amendment were approved, they would be recognized. I'm just not clear if an application was to rezone something to mixed use, but it's just using let's say the neighborhood mixed use zone in the City of Barrie's comprehensive zoning bylaw. While it's site specific, it's just implementing the zoning framework for the Hewitts and Salem secondary plan areas. Is every single amendment that's ever approved recognized, but something that otherwise is zone mixed use is not recognized? And I'm struggling with that fundamentally. And then on this particular item, I also represent a number of different development companies that are all basically covered off by Fernbrook Developments and Hassey Realty. And outside of the Hewitt secondary plan, I would say this is something I want to talk about in terms of existing approvals for a site-specific industrial use or other use outside in the City of Barrie. How come a site-specific rezoning to light industrial would be recognized, I think, by this policy, but if the cities had zoned it light industrial, it's not recognized. And I think work needs to be done on this existing approvals language. I appreciate its inclusion. It's a great starting point. It just needs to be worked through to make it absolutely clear about the intent and what does and doesn't apply. And then the second part, which is a very specific concern about for some of the landowners in Hewitt's, who I represent this evening, including the Barrie Lockhart Road, which is otherwise known as Sorbera, which is 400 Lockhart Road, the BEMP owners on Mapleview Drive at 515 Mapleview, and the 970 Mapleview landowners. All three of those landowners have, in the case of BEMP, they have registered mixed-use blocks on a registered, on draft approved and registered plans, and then the 970 and Sorbera have draft approved mixed-use blocks that are on all of them are zone mixed use. So they're recognized, but you're applying the permissions of the mixed use designation and zone, but it only applies in the same ownership. What if there's a restructuring of the company? What if they're entering into a joint venture? What if they sell to a builder? What if they sell to a future landowner or an individual unit owner? Do they become legal non-conforming? I quite frankly don't think the Planning Act gives you the jurisdiction to apply permissions on an ownership basis. And I'd like the opportunity to have a more comprehensive discussion about that, because I think you want to put a sunset on it, but I don't think the sunset that you proposed is reasonable in the context of developing future mixed-use blocks.
Yeah, Ray, I'm just going to jump in here only because I know it was raised before, and I think we did talk about it. And ultimately what the intent of this was, and it is a new policy, so it hasn't been vetted in the same way that some of the other drafts have. And sometimes we have draft plan approvals that have actually just nothing, it just says future block. And that's really more what we meant to say, was something that has no approval, that literally is just a block that's got nothing. If someone just bought an empty block and wanted to develop it. So we take your point for sure about the intent and what we actually wanted to do. So we will, there's absolutely some more work to be done on this policy for sure. I'm just going to remind you, we're at about 11 minutes, Ray. So if you can, there is leeway, but if you can try to
I will keep moving, no problem.
Thank you.
Michelle. On the existing applications front, the concern with that one is it seems to recognize any applications that are deemed complete. What about applications? We'd like clear, I think that's clear under the clergy principle anyway, but the bigger concern is, what about applications for red line revisions or draft plan extensions? Are they also going to be subject to some new policy framework, or can they continue as they have been draft approved up to that point? And that's a fairly common thing. As you know, every year after the first 3 years, we have to do a draft plan extension request. And there's lots of reasons for red line revisions to slightly change unit types based on a builder who's bought the lots or whatever else. So I think clarity on those two would be very helpful. My next policy that I want to speak to, this is in the community hub section, and there was some, just wanted to comment, Keith made a comment on that. It says that should a public service facility not be required, then the development may be in accordance with the majority surrounding land use designation without an amendment. Great, that was added at our request, perfect. But then it also says where limited or no uses other than residential or institutional exist within 450 meters, you need a mix of land uses. So you've got an interior a school site in the middle of a subdivision on maybe minor collector, at most major collector roads, and you're going to force internal commercial, when internal commercial really should be oriented at the very least to the arterial roads, which your official plan is describing. So I think this doesn't jive with 2642C. If the school board doesn't want the land should be able to be developed in accordance with the neighborhood area policies, full stop. Shouldn't be forcing commercial into the middle of a 100-acre subdivision in the middle of the secondary plan area. So I'd ask you to reconsider that. The next one I want to talk about is specifically a policy in the comment matrix. It says that because I brought this up previously, it says that parks, they'll be restricted in parks but not prohibited. But in fact, it says the low development features should not be located in parklands. And we have numerous parklands where we've been working through design charrettes with the Conservation Authority, working with city staff, where the function of the park remains, but the lid facilities go into parks because it's helpful from a water balance and all kinds of sustainability perspectives. So I ask you what's the reason we're putting it in parkland to make the city more sustainable, to address environmental issues and other things? What's the reason for prohibiting in a park? I don't see that, and I'd ask you to remove that. The next point, and these are green development standards. I'm really struggling how any application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, plan of subdivision, site plan approval are going to somehow demonstrate all of these things. And it says that why certain best practices are not pursued. I'm just at a loss of what you expect out of this. And maybe you can provide a terms of reference to help me understand this, but the landowners don't get it. And like how we're reducing construction weight and diverting construction waste from landfill, how we're, you know, that you're using, there's something about reducing reusable and recycled building material content. What's your expectation here? That we just make a best efforts to try to do some of these things? Are you actually expecting all of these things, which would be practically impossible? This policy is concerning, and I'm not understanding how it's going to be implemented. It's not 10, I apologize. Almost working there. Not too much longer, Mcallen. Thank you for your indulgence. This says low-rise buildings that abut detached semis or townhouses should generally be set back 7.5 meters from the property line. Number one, I don't know why an OP has a 7.5 meter setback at all. Why is that not a zoning bylaw matter? You've done a great job of cleaning all that sort of, you know, setbacks and unnecessary numerical language in the OP. Why is this in here is the first point. And the number two, isn't a single detached building a low-rise building to start with? So, you know, we don't require 7.5 meters now. We have it in the city of Barrie, singles to singles or singles to townhouses since at least 1985. What, like, I don't think the intent is every low-rise building. It's got to be some sort of height. Is that at 4 stories or I don't know what, but I don't think it should be in there at all. And if it is, clarify that it doesn't apply to ground-oriented backing onto ground-oriented, which I hope that's not what you mean, but it's not clear. Moving forward, we are almost there. Okay, I'm going to go to 90. This applies to all surface parking lots in the city of Barrie for new development. Where possible, surface parking lots shall incorporate the use of pervious surfaces to the greatest extent possible. I think that's an unreasonable expectation. To the greatest extent possible, you can, except where you have high groundwater table, you can use permeable pavers. But are you saying you don't want to see asphalt parking lots anymore? You're going to expect the incredible cost associated with surface parking lots and even for affordable housing projects and elsewhere. And then you have to, they're like permeable pavers. You have to rip them up in 10 years and clean them out and then put them all back again. It's just, that's to the greatest extent possible. And where possible, this needs a rethink. And I ask you to reconsider that. 2 last points.
You have 2 minutes, Ray. You really can't go past 20 minutes. So 2 minutes, hopefully they're quick ones. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the commercial required within 450 meters of new development. That seems to mean that the commercial is going to get forced down towards Lockhart in the Hewitts area, which is a one-sided street. So I ask you to put some flexibility in the 450 meters to reconsider whether or not you really want to drive all your commercial uses down to Lockhart Road. You know, I think it's more appropriate to drive commercial uses if you're requiring them towards Mapleview Drive. And then the last comment, and it's something that you and I had already, was brought up by the previous speaker. This is the OP schedule. Sorry, that's not what I'm looking for. I apologize. It's this one here. It's the right-of-way widths. They have been increased significantly in some cases in the official plan. Particularly, I'll show you, I'm working on this site here. I represent ASA Development Inc., 989 Yonge Street. You've increased the Lockhart road width from 34 meters to 43 meters. That's a massive increase considering we're working on our site plan. We've got rezoning approval, and we're working on a site plan for the first phase of this development. Another 9 meters impacts all of the buildings that are proposed on this site. And it's a massive shift, as is the shift in the impact on Rainsong, potentially across the street, or the impact on Mapleview Drive requiring 41 meters along this edge. So the comment matrix says it's a problem. We got to keep working through it. But these are significant impacts to existing developments that are moving forward. And the rules, it's very difficult to plan and work through the process when the rules change like that. And that's, we ask you to reconsider what the right-of-way widths are for widenings in the Hewitt's and Hewitt secondary plan area. Other than that, Michelle, I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Ray. Thank you.
Sorry, I do have one last comment. I'm sorry, Michelle. And
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Okay, well, it's a different landowner and it's a different topic. So I just want your indulgence. The city's official plan, I'm talking about existing uses for industrial lands. A vast majority of the city right now is designated general industrial. And you've created two new designations called employment industrial and employment non-industrial. And those industrial designations are going to influence what is permitted in the zoning bylaw. So right now, there's thousands of industrial units in the city of Barrie that have a lot of permissions in the zoning bylaw, like light industrial or general industrial. There's 60 uses in that bylaw, 29 of which are commercial, 5 are institutional, but your zoning, your OP is much more restrictive now. And I don't think that the existing use policies is covering those off. So you're effectively going to prohibit uses in your new zoning bylaw when you get to it on uses on employment development that currently exists. And I think that's a fundamental problem with your OP that needs to be sorted out. And the only way I think that you can work through it is to try drafting a permitted use table in your for the future zoning bylaw as it relates to light industrial, general industrial lands. Otherwise, the impacts to the employment base across the city of Barrie could be monumental. And I think that's being overlooked. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ray. I do want to take a moment to just introduce that Councillor Jim Harris has joined us. He did have a I think I said earlier, he had a conflict. He was able to join us just around the time that Kathy Colbach spoke, so he did not miss anything and he is on the call. The next speaker is Chris Menzies. Chris, you should be able to be promoted and unmute yourself. And if you can keep your comments around the 5-minute mark or as brief and concise as possible, everybody would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can you hear me, Michelle?
We can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time. And like many of the speakers tonight, I just want to echo my thanks for all the work that Michelle, you and Thomas have been doing on this official plan. We're moving in a lot of really good directions. I have and will be sending in written comments with respect to various of my clients. For those of you who don't know me, I am a land use planning consultant here in the city. But more generically, I want to talk about two things on a theme basis that are more citywide. One has to do with density calculations and how the city is now doing it in the new September draft. And the second has to do with source protection. And I'll give you some section numbers. And Thomas was gracious enough to set aside some time for me in the coming days to talk about some of these specifically. So I'll try and take a high level view of this. So the first section is section 2.5, C like Charlie. And it relates to net versus gross density. So the previous OP said basically when you're looking on a site-by-site basis, you should calculate your gross density or your units per hectare on a net basis. And my comments relate to, I believe we should go back to that. And the rationale for that is for example, in your medium density residential designation, I'll use that as an example, the policies now say that you have to provide a range of 125 to 300 units per hectare. So as an example, if you have a 5-hectare site, you would be doing 625 to 1,500 units on that 5-hectare site. But on a gross basis, for example, if that property, say, hosts a park and a storm pond on 4 of those 5 hectares, you would be placing that 625 to 1,500 units on the remaining 1 hectare of land. I'm not sure that's what the intention of the policy is. As you know, Michelle, and as Thomas knows, the genesis of the gross density is from the growth plan. The growth plan identifies gross density should be looked at over the entirety of the greenfield area, which is reflected in the city's policies under section 2.4.2.3, E like elephant. And that's the only place where gross density is described. So once again, the growth plan and the city OP rightly says, you agree with the number or you don't agree with the number, but today it says 79 people or jobs per hectare over the entirety of the greenfield area. And there's a couple of takeouts. One of those is you don't calculate that over EP areas, but you do calculate it over parks and you do calculate it over storm ponds. And that to me as a planner makes a ton of sense. But if you use that same rationale for gross density on a site-by-site basis, in the analogy I just gave, there's potentially unintentional consequences that may happen. So I think gross density across the entirety of the greenfield area policy is appropriate, and frankly, we're required to do it anyway because of the growth plan. But gross density on a site-by-site basis, I think, should be relooked at. The next theme I want to talk about is source protection. So as many know, a lot of the source protection mapping has been changed in this version, and there has been a lot more new source protection policies included. So in some ways, I look at this as a first cut. There's 3 policies specifically I want to talk about. I'll give you those section numbers. There's 6511 A, II. And effect, this policy restricts or limits development and land uses in wellhead protection areas. And as many of you know, the source protection plan, the land use policies are picked up from there and put into your OP. And I think what the source protection plan probably says is, in wellhead protection areas, you should restrict or limit development, which is a threat. And I think that word is missing. So I don't think the intention of the policies is restrict or limit development in wellhead protection areas, which is approximately a third of the municipality is subject to a wellhead protection area, including the entirety of downtown. I think the intention of the policies, or I'm suggesting that the policy should restrict or limit development, which is a threat to the source protection areas. Similarly, section 6516B, like brother IV, requires a risk assessment to be undertaken if certain uses are proposed, which could be a significant threat to drinking water sources. Understandable. One of the examples they provide is the storage of chemical fertilizer, which once again is understandable. I think the city would, from a land use perspective, would want to control where chemical fertilizers are being stored, and a hard look has to be garnered if in fact those areas are in a source protection area. But one of the other examples, which is item IV, is snow storage. Having used source protection plans, and admittedly having not read the City of Barrie's in detail, I would suggest to you that the source protection plan probably intends that snow storage areas subject to a risk assessment are those snow storage areas which are industrial sized or large quantities of snow storage, like where the city stores its snow when it removes all the snow banks in front of my office here in downtown Barrie. But there's a potential in the future that this could be interpreted that any snow storage area would be subject to a risk assessment. And to use extreme example, would that, as an example, be somebody who is shoveling snow from their driveway and storing it on their lawn? And I know that's not the intent of what the policy basis is, so I think we should just be a little bit mindful of what the intention is and what that policy says. There is one other, and I'll talk to Thomas a little bit more specifically about it, but I'll just give you the section number. It's 5524, new policies B, C, and D. And it's along the similar theme of being mindful of what the intent of the source protection plan is and how we translate that into policies themselves. So once again, I'd just like to thank you for your time and listening to my weenie planning rant about source protection and how density, I believe, should be calculated. And I do look forward to the future meetings we have on those site-specific files that we have here in the city, Michelle, that we still want to continue to have conversations with you on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. Have a good evening. The next speaker on the list is Corey Chisholm. So Corey, you should be promoted very soon, and you should be able to unmute yourself. And if you can keep your comments as close to 5 minutes as possible, everyone would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. So thanks, Michelle, and good evening, Planning Committee and staff. My name's Corey Chisholm, and I'm a partner with MHBC Planning, also out of our Barrie office. This evening, I'll be providing brief comments on behalf of 4 of our clients. We did also submit more detailed written comments to city staff for their review, and I'll just take a brief run through those. So the first client I'd like to provide comments on behalf of this evening is Kirkwood Properties. While we were just recently retained by Kirkwood and continued to review the city's new official plan as it relates to the variety of land holdings they have throughout the city, which includes over 20 properties. My comments this evening relate to just one specific property, and that's 45 Harvey Road. These lands were initially identified as employment area non-industrial, and then through the process were revised to employment area industrial within later drafts. Upon a deeper review of the draft policy framework and through discussions with our client and understanding their development aspirations on the property, it is our opinion that the employment area non-industrial would be the more appropriate land use designation on the property from both a permitted use and a land use compatibility perspective. We have formally requested this change within our written comments and will be reaching out directly to city staff to try to schedule an opportunity to review that further with them. My second client is Sky Dev Co., who recently purchased the former YMCA site at 10 to 24 Grove Street West, and who are actively working through the site plan approval process with city staff. First of all, we would like to thank staff for meeting with us to review and discuss the comments we had provided on the second draft and for all the efforts that went into producing the third draft, including what is the longest comment response table I think I've seen to date. We would like to express our support for the inclusion of the transition policy for active applications and have provided one minor comment related to this, which we believe will assist with future interpretation and implementation of that policy. Otherwise, the balance of the comments we had submitted on the second draft have been addressed. My third client I would like to submit comments on behalf of this evening is PBM Realty Holdings, Inc., who own a variety of industrial and residential properties within the city. First, we would like to applaud and thank city staff's efforts in producing the third draft and for taking the time to meet with us to discuss the comments we had submitted on the second draft further. Overall, we are largely supportive of the changes that have been made within the third draft of the city's official plan. While we are certainly supportive of the introduction of the transition policies and existing approvals policies, we have provided a few suggested minor changes which we feel will assist in consistent interpretation and implementation moving forward. Specifically as it relates to ensuring existing permitted uses within the city's zoning bylaw will be carried forward in the city's future implementing zoning bylaw. And those comments largely echo some of the comments Ray Duhamel raised at the end of his deputation regarding the volume of permitted uses that exist across the city's current industrial zones, and just ensuring that those will continue after this official plan comes into effect and the city moves forward with their new zoning bylaw. My fourth and final client I would like to submit comments on behalf of this evening is Mcallen and Associates. While Mcallen and Associates land holdings include a variety of properties within the city, our comments relate to one property at the northeast corner of Arda Road and County Road 27. These lands were part of a joint EIS completed back in 2009 in concert with 2 of the other nearby landowners. This study identified potentially developable areas on all 3 of these sites, which were ultimately reviewed and accepted at the time by the MNRF and NVCA and enshrined within the current city official plan as the ARDA secondary planning area policies. The 2 other sites, it's noted, have since progressed through the planning approvals process. We have been monitoring the new official plan on behalf of our client and identified that these policies were proposed to be carried forward within the first and second draft of the city's new official plan, which we were supportive of. However, within the most recent third draft, this policy framework has been removed and the entirety of the lands identified for environmental protection in response to comments that were within the comment response matrix provided by the MBCA. This change would essentially have the effect of removing the existing development permissions our client has had on the lands dating back to 2009 and sterilizing these well-positioned lands before they can be considered through the typical planning approval process. Our request is that this change be reversed and the existing policy framework be carried forward as it was proposed within the first 2 drafts of the city's new official plan. This policy framework provides an opportunity for our client to proceed through the typical planning process for residential development on a portion of the property along the Ardagh Road frontage, requiring our client to complete the typical supporting studies and reports that are required as part of a complete Planning Act application. I don't see there being any risk to the city by reverting back to the existing policy framework related to these lands. It is noted, Director Banfield has already reached out to our team directly to schedule a meeting to review this matter in more detail with her and her team. And we do greatly appreciate that and do look forward to those discussions. In general, that concludes my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Corey. I don't think that there'll be questions tonight, but we certainly appreciate your time, and we look forward to meeting with you and your client in a couple of weeks. Okay, the next speaker, and I think we had 8:30 as the end time. We do have a handful more speakers, so I'd like to let everybody, Darren Bella, yeah, thank you, you're the next speaker. So we will still try to keep it to as concise as you possibly can. Darren, 5-ish minutes would be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for letting me speak at another planning night in Barrie. Is it possible that I can just share my screen really quickly?
Yes, Darren, I think one of the technical team members can bring you in as a panelist to share your screen.
And I think I'm going to be brief, Michelle, just because a few of the other planners this evening, some of my colleagues have already raised some of the points, so I don't want to belabor or repeat what's been said. So I'll definitely try and keep my talking points brief.
Can you share your screen, Darren? Yeah, you should be able to. At the bottom,
Thanks,
there you
Michelle.
go.
That's great. Can you see the screen?
We can.
Super, thank you. Okay, so this evening, and I think everyone said it, and I'll just say it very quickly again, thank you for all of your work. The changes are noticeable, they're significant. You've done a great job at trying to respond to concerns, whether they're from individual owners or consultants or land developers, so greatly appreciate that. The first issue that I would like to raise is a issue on behalf of Tansley Properties. And this is with respect to properties they own along Innisfil Street and Jacobs Terrace. So this is located within one of your major transit station areas. This is the Allendale Major Transit Station area, which on the top left slide, there's an excerpt from your schedule, which identifies the blue and red dots as the properties within the blue color, which is your MTSA area. What we are looking to, or we're requesting from staff, is a reconsideration on some swapping of designations. So there are two parcels that are owned by Tansley. There is one municipally known as 280 Innisfil Street, and that parcel is the smaller of the two, which is shown on the bottom right-hand slide. That land is currently proposed to be designated high density, and we're requesting that that land be converted to medium density. At the same time, the other parcel owned by Tansley at 1733 Jacobs Terrace, we would request that the city consider changing the proposed medium density designation to high density. So effectively swapping the medium and high designations between these two properties, which are owned by the same developer. And the reasons for this mainly are due to the fact that at 280 Innisfil Street, the smaller parcel, the size of the parcel, the configuration of the parcel, the frontage that it does possess along Innisfil Street does not lend itself to a high density form of development where the minimum height requirement in the OP is 12 stories. So that's going to be a very difficult thing to achieve. And we believe that there is an opportunity to meet the policies of your official plan under the high density designation more appropriately at 17 and 33 Jacobs Terrace. So Tonlu, as you know, we've had many meetings about this large proposal within the Allendale area. They are committed to revitalizing Allendale, and this change would greatly assist in facilitating meeting those objectives. So next, I've just cut some of the language out of the official plan and just highlighted some verbiage that I think is a little bit concerning. And as you've admitted, this is kind of the first cut to this language. So there may need to be some changes to the overall wording. So as Mr. Mckinnon, Mr. Duhamel have pointed out, I think recognizing existing approvals and using language such as same ownership and whether blocks have been sold or not, there's probably some better language that can be used here to accomplish the goal. And obviously, if lands are sold to another owner, they're sold based on the existing zoning and designation that's in place. And this would effectively mean that the land being sold would really be difficult to determine what the value of that land would be, because it's being sold based on what the current official plan says the property can be used for, which should be in conflict with the current approval. So I think there's a little bit of work that needs to be done relative to this policy, and I look forward to providing some suggested revised language in an upcoming submission. And then as it relates to 952, this is my last comment. So this relates to phasing. And so I thought it was interesting that under subsection J, the word timely is used in describing how they would like to, the city would like to proceed with phases. And I think under I, the provision does allow for the timely build out of neighborhoods, because you're allowing the planning process to begin prior to registration of developments in future phases. That has definitely significantly changed for future phases. So for phase 3 landowners, for them to wait for 60% of lands to be registered in M plans, that means all of the servicing is done within phase 2 lands. And as you can see with the construction that's going on right now, there are instances where phases are intertwined for the purposes of building major infrastructure. And we feel that allowing or continuing with this policy regime for the phase 3 lands will create a significant delay to the timing in which the city would ultimately be receiving development charges, as well as seeing the build out continue throughout these areas. So we're hoping that the phase 3 lands can be treated the same as the phase 2 lands, and we're asking for there to be some reconsideration as it relates to this policy. That's it, Ms. Banfield. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. If you can stop sharing your screen. Thanks very much, Darren. The next speaker on the list is Matthew Corey. Matthew, if you are able to join the call, and you should be able to unmute yourself. And if you can keep your comments to around the 5-minute mark, as brief as possible, we'd all appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, Michelle. Can you hear me?
I can. We all can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I'll be very brief. I did want to say, as you know, I represent Div Barrie, which is Dorsey out at 1080 Lockhart Road. We've given comments through the whole official plan, and I wanted to first echo, as brief as I'm going to be, a thanks for all the hard work that you've done and your staff have done. Certainly many of the comments that we've given in the past, we can see a lot of good movement on them and policy improvements, and really appreciate you listening and working with us on a lot of these. There are a few comments. I did submit a letter earlier to you today, and I won't go through all the comments in that letter that we think are outstanding or important. The biggest one, I think, that we do feel it's very important to talk about, and I will say this, I do, Ray Duhamel and his comments, I think we echo many of them, if not all of them, that he's made. But for our site specifically, the removal of the Hewitt secondary plan remains a big concern, and fully understand and can appreciate Michelle, that I think where you're headed is that you're not going to reintegrate the secondary plan, and that's understood. I think from our client's perspective, but we do think that the policies and all the good planning needs to be brought forward, especially in section 288. You've got site-specific policies that capture where there's been an OMB approval or a pre-existing approval. And we think an addition of a policy like that for our lands is probably the best solution going forward, and really want to work with you to ideally hone our comments down to maybe that site-specific policy that can capture the intent. And then I think there's some map changes that have to go along with that in terms of the mapping, but we have a proposed policy. We're thinking something along the lines of in 288, notwithstanding the policies of the plan, the lands noted on map 2, municipally known as 1080 Lockhart Road, part lot 20 concession 11 are permitted to develop for single and semi-detached uses, all forms of townhouse dwellings and one park. The land shall be planned to achieve a minimum overall density of 55 residents and jobs per hectare. And the development approvals on these lands shall not require the preparation of a secondary plan. And finally, the development of the lands may proceed in phase 2 east in accordance with policy 952 of this plan. And I think that captures a number of concerns, which is that we don't want to be subject to a new secondary plan, given that there was an old one that's gone. I just want to make sure that's clear. And you had some very helpful policies that were speaking to properties out on the boundary needing to have transition. And you and I have had this discussion in the past. And we wanted a bit more specificity potentially, and we're hoping a site-specific policy of that nature may give us the clarity that we need to have the OP work and move forward together on this. So thank you. I'll limit my comments to that. And there's others that we have, and there's map changes that go along with that. But you have our letter, and we'd really appreciate a follow-up meeting with Tomas or yourself, Michelle, to just go over that. And thank you so much for this opportunity again to provide input.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Have a good evening. The next speaker is Cecilia Lee. Cecilia, you should be able to unmute yourself, and if you can keep your comments to about 5 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Michelle.
Yes, hi, Cecilia.
You can hear me, I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, good to see you, and
likewise.
Thank you for having me on the call today as well as speaker. For everyone else here, good evening. My name is Cecilia Lee. I speak for only one property, and that property is at 599 Dunlop Street West. And yeah, for this property, Michelle, as you know, this it is zoned as a commercial C4. And under the new draft official plan, it is now grouped under employment land, non-industrial. And we have meetings before, and you've kindly also replied to my questions. Now I heard that some previous speakers, they have similar concern, which I am going to reiterate, because I only have one property, and I just want to let people know that specifically that is also our concern. So when I submitted the comments, I was actually specifically concerned with having the land group under this called employment area non-industrial, with the proposal to have the residential component removed. And we have a discussion at this at length, and I do understand that that's the province direction, so that the city is also trying to comply with not having residential at all in this particular land designation. Now, while there is some flexibility, I do think that the feedback I received, there was some I was trying to interpret the the feedback to my understanding, but I must say that it was not what you guys have intended, maybe, and that you tell me that it is actually because you have two overlapping policies that were at work. So regardless of the explanation, I appreciate the fact that you guys are saying no to me and saying that the employment land is for job creation. So let me be clear that it is not what we had expected. We spent money and time to get the zoning C4 as we have done it. And it is now changed from a mixed use, which is actually only a 20% for residential within one building. And I was seeing that there are advantages for leaving C4 the way it is with just a tiny portion as residential, because there are advantages there in terms of workers coming to work in Barrie can conveniently reside close by the working location. So it could be actually, when we want job creation, you want both investment and labor. So that's something I would like you to reconsider, and that's something I guess get into a bigger picture that you would need to have some discussion with the province, that it is not cut and dry in terms of that's the only way to go. Now, having said that, I do appreciate all the new version of your official plan had built in some flexibility to allow light industry, within also the employment area to be allowed to be kind of exchanged with the non-industrial section. So there's some flexibility there. There's also flexibility, but I'm not sure when you say it is also applying to us to the commercial district. Now, when I read up, so I was pointed to that direction. So I went ahead and read that section. So, but it is unclear to me that all the things that were listed there in that C4 now that we are allowed to also building like an institution land, like in that case, we can build affordable housing, which I know Barrie dearly needed. So having said all that, I'm just saying that I'm almost like Ray and Corey saying, it is unclear to me eventually when you do update the zoning bylaw that's concerned particular on C4, are you only removing the residential components? Should I read the C4 the way it is today, just with that exception? Because when you do change something else, it will affect us, how we would be able to build, okay? So, I think I echo Ray in terms of it will help us to let us know that we're using a permitted use table, unless you say the only thing removed is the residential component. Even after you give it the reconsideration, in that way, we will just read word for what is allowed, so that make sure that overstepping what is not permitted. Even though your original response said that all existing permission are upholding, so I'm actually a little bit unclear. So please have your permitted use table and your timing and changes that you intend to do into the zoning bylaw for C4. I would appreciate that.
Great, thank you, Cecilia. And you're right, you and Ray are talking about, we're here talking about the official plan that lays that groundwork for the zoning, and the zoning bylaw is the one certainly that does have that that chart. And again, the intent of these uses, or this new structure for the employment area is to, as I said, look a bit of that transition, protect some of those land uses, but it's actually intended to be more flexible. So we absolutely will take that comment back and try to make that more clear for everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Cecilia. Our next speaker is Brian Tansley. I see you're already on the call here. Hi, Brian. You can unmute yourself, and if you can share your words, we'd love to hear them. Thanks.
Can you hear me, Michelle?
We can.
Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the forum to do so. I appreciate all the work that's gone into the official plan and the matrix. I know that must have been a daunting task. And, you know, thanks for trying to find strike a balance between, you know, the objectives of the developers and protecting the interests of the citizens of Barrie. My comment on the official plan is one kind of opposing to a lot of opinions heard tonight, would be to, you know, put some protection around the wellheads and drinking water, and not be too loose in the language for protecting that the wellheads and the drinking water protection. And I was wondering, given the recent revelations about budget and sustainability over the coming years, over developments and development costs, how the official plan is going to address that growing concern, I guess. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. So Brian is the last speaker, I believe. We had a couple of people that did register, but we don't see them on the call. So I'm just going to shout out their names. Is there Amy Corser on the call? And Amy Corser? We don't see her on the call. Another one is John Bartosik. Is John on the call, or is someone using his ID? Diane Chislett, she also had registered to speak, but we don't see her on the call. Diane? No? Okay. All right, everyone. Well, that ends all of our speakers. And again, I just want to say thank you to our EMT members, our staff members that are on the call, and certainly all of members of council. You know, there were all of you were here with the exception of one councillor, Councillor Natalie Harris, that had a conflict, but all of the council members were able to attend to listen to this town hall, and those comments that people really wanted to share with everybody. As always, we will take everything back. We will do a follow-up specifically if you've asked for it, but we also will capture some of those comments either in our staff report or on our website. We'll have to see how we do that, but you've all registered, so we know how to reach you. So rest assured, you will get follow-up, and you of course know where we all are. So thank you very, very much for coming. Thanks everybody for being as concise as possible. It was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Continue to watch buildingbarrie.ca, register. Those are where you're going to get all those updates. And there's tons of ways to reach all of us on the call. Tomaz has joined us, myself, Anna Sajecki. Also, you'll get emails from her, so you know where to reach us. So thank you all very much. Have a fantastic evening.